First up, we have Met Gala royalty. Queen Bee.
The Met Gala 2026 dominated headlines overnight. Beyoncé made her return after a 10-year absence, while Nicole Kidman co-chaired the event under the theme Fashion is Art. Every major Hollywood name ascended the museum steps in designer creations worth more than most people see in a lifetime of earnings. Fashion editors were ready. Stylists had invested months into perfecting every detail, and the entire red carpet machinery was running at full capacity. Yet by the following morning, style journalists had shifted their attention to someone else entirely. Alex Eala, currently ranked world number 42 in singles and reaching a career best number 88 in doubles, is deep in Rome preparing for her Italian Open first-round match against Magdalena Frech, a contest that could eventually set up a meeting with Wang Xinyu and strengthen her case for a top 32 seeding ahead of Roland Garros. By every conventional measure, she should simply be another player grinding through clay season. But 2 weeks earlier in Madrid, she stepped into a room full of the world's greatest athletes wearing a custom Filipiniana gown designed by her uncle in just 7 days, and the moment refused to be forgotten. WTA players posted about it. Commentators highlighted it. The conversation surrounding that outfit kept spreading online, even as Met Gala coverage flooded every corner of social media. The deeper question here has nothing to do with fashion. It is about what happens when someone carrying Alex Eala's cultural weight walks into any room, and why the most frantic attempts to replicate her presence may be coming from directions nobody anticipated. To understand it, you have to go back to Madrid on April 21st, during the Laureus World Sports Awards, the event the sports world treats the way Hollywood treats the Oscars. Carlos Alcaraz claimed Sportsman of the Year. Aryna Sabalenka took Sportswoman of the Year. Novak Djokovic and Eileen Gu hosted the evening inside the breathtaking Palacio de Cibeles, one of Europe's most visually commanding venues. This was no casual appearance. Into that room walked a 20-year-old Filipina tennis player who, just 1 week earlier, had called her uncle and told him she needed a dress. Not just any dress, a Filipiniana that would genuinely represent where she came from, in a space filled with athletes who had spent entire careers representing nations. Her uncle, Red Eala, is a well-regarded Filipino fashion designer. Yet he had never created a custom piece for his niece before. This would be the first time, and he had only 7 days to make it happen. Most couture houses take months to complete a finished piece. Red had a week, and still delivered something powerful enough to stop a room that is nearly impossible to impress. The gown featured a blush beige chiffon floor-length silhouette with a strapless neckline and soft pleats flowing across the bodice. The waist cut was a specific request from Alex herself, adding a personal signature to the final design. Draped over it was a removable piña bolero with the iconic Turno butterfly sleeves, crafted from piña fabric woven from pineapple leaf fibers, one of the most culturally significant textiles in Filipino heritage, carrying centuries of history and meaning. Standing at 1.75 meters tall, Alex wore the piece exactly as it was intended. Red described her as the perfect fashion mannequin, with the chiffon column moving naturally as she walked, giving the impression that the design had been refined over months rather than assembled in days. Throughout the evening, she alternated between wearing and removing the bolero, and every time she did, cameras followed immediately. The reaction across the tennis world became impossible to overlook. Multiple WTA players posted publicly about the look, expressing genuine admiration. That kind of response carries weight, because professional tennis players rarely react so openly to another player's fashion choices unless something truly unforgettable has occurred. Andy Roddick, a Grand Slam champion and one of the most respected voices in American tennis media, openly acknowledged her growing global presence, not as a passing internet moment, but as an established reality within the sport. Alex Eala's popularity operates at a scale tennis rarely sees from someone at her ranking. Her Filipino fanbase travels to tournaments, fills entire stadium sections, and follows every match, every outfit, and even every Instagram caption she publishes. At one point, Alex reflected on that support by wondering how many people back home were praying for her, and said that thought pushed her to give everything she had on court. Then came the moment that quietly deepened her cultural reach even further. After Madrid, after the awards, after weeks of navigating clay season and withdrawing from the Catalonia Open to protect her body for bigger challenges ahead, she posted a simple Instagram photo album. No lengthy explanation, no dramatic recap. Just 4 words, a loud life in soft lighting. Somehow, that single caption captured the entire Madrid experience. The red carpet elegance, the intensity of the attention, the dress, the cameras, the global conversation, without ever addressing any of it directly. That kind of cultural instinct does not come by accident. It reflects someone who understands not only how to compete at the highest level, but also how to shape an image in a way that feels completely natural. And that is where the fashion world entered the conversation in a way nobody saw coming. While the Met Gala 2026 invited its guests to express their personal relationship with fashion as a living form of art, an intentionally open brief designed to spark creativity and individual expression, many people watching the biggest names in Hollywood walk that carpet found themselves drawing comparisons to what Alex Eala had already created weeks earlier in Madrid, with 7 days, 1 phone call, and a dress that carried an entire culture on its shoulders. Sabrina Carpenter, Doja Cat, Gwendolyn Christie, Elizabeth Debicki, and Lisa. With ticket prices reaching $75,000 and previous editions raising tens of millions for the Metropolitan Museum of Art Costume Institute, the event once again placed fashion at the center of global cultural spectacle. The theme fashion is art served as the guiding principle of the night. Yet just 2 weeks earlier, a tennis player in a Piña Bolero had already answered that idea in a way few expected anyone outside the fashion industry to achieve so directly. The Filipiniana she wore is not a costume. It is a national dress with deep, living cultural roots. The Turno's butterfly sleeves are not decorative flourishes, but structural elements that have defined Filipino formal wear for generations. When Alex described it on Instagram as something that made a Filipina feel most beautiful, she wasn't reaching for branding language. She was articulating identity. She also called it a quiet nod to where she comes from and what she carries into rooms like that. That phrase matters because it reveals a contrast, a room filled with global icons, hosted by figures like Djokovic and Eileen Gu, and yet she framed her cultural presence as something quiet, not performative, not amplified, simply present. That is not calculated modesty. It reads more like someone who has carried that identity her entire life and finally stepped into a space large enough for it to be seen without needing an explanation. In the aftermath, fashion editors paid attention. The conversation about what she wore in Madrid was still circulating when the Met Gala red carpet opened in New York. Style journalists assigned to cover the 2026 event suddenly found themselves fielding questions about a Filipiniana from 2 weeks prior. That is not normal. It doesn't happen because of a coordinated PR campaign or a manufactured rollout. It happens when an image carries genuine cultural staying power. And that is where the word desperate takes on a different meaning, not as mockery, but as observation. When something organically holds more sustained attention than a $31 million global fashion event anchored by figures like Beyoncé, the people whose entire industry is built around shaping cultural moments notice very quickly. Filipino designers who have long worked within a space of growing, but still limited international recognition began receiving new inquiries. The Filipiniana itself started shifting from a cultural garment to a reference point in broader fashion conversations that had previously never engaged with it. Because to imitate something, it first has to be acknowledged as worth imitating. That acknowledgement is exactly what happened. Now pull back to the tennis court, because Alex Eala is not a fashion figure taking a detour through tennis. She is a tennis player who happens to carry a level of cultural weight that most players at her ranking simply do not. As this story continues to unfold, she is in Rome at the Italian Open, one of the 2 most significant clay court events before Roland Garros. She enters as world number 42 in singles, a climb confirmed after her Madrid result settled, and as high as number 88 in doubles, up 13 spots following her run there alongside Turkish partner Zeynep Sönmez. Her first-round opponent is Magdalena Frech, currently ranked number 45, and the two have never met before. A win could set up a potential rematch with Wang Xinyu, a matchup that already carries context. Wang defeated her earlier this year at the ASB Classic in New Zealand in a tightly contested three-set match, 5-7, 7-5, 6-4. Close enough that any second meeting would feel like an entirely different story. But the clay season has been uneven. Former British number 1 Greg Rusedski publicly flagged a pattern of inconsistency, pointing to sharp performance swings that have defined recent weeks. In Madrid, for example, she followed a commanding straight sets win over Anastasia Pavlyuchenkova, 6-3, 6-3, with a one-sided defeat to Elise Mertens, 2-6, 1-6. The kind of contrast that illustrates exactly what Rusedski was referring to. One round she looks fully in control, the next she is chasing the match from behind. Closing that gap is the specific challenge she needs to solve before Paris. Roland Garros begins on May 24th, and she turns 21 the day before, May 23rd. Her French Open debut as a professional last year ended in the first round against Emiliana Arango of Colombia, a reminder of how quickly margins tighten at Grand Slam level. This year, the numbers are more favorable. She is defending only 20 ranking points across both Rome and Roland Garros combined, meaning every win from this point forward adds directly to her total without the pressure of protecting prior results. In pure ranking mathematics, the situation is quietly working in her favor heading into Paris. She doesn't need a miracle run or a sudden leap in form. She needs steady progression, starting with getting through early rounds. That alone could change everything. Breaking into the top 32 would earn her a seeded position at Grand Slams, and that single threshold restructures a tournament entirely. It reduces the likelihood of facing top players in the opening rounds, increases the probability of reaching the second week, and fundamentally shifts a player's profile from contender to legitimate threat. She is currently just 11 spots away from that line, and both Rome and Paris remain active opportunities to cross it. This is the context sitting beneath the fashion conversation, not as a distraction from tennis, but as the foundation of it. Alex Eala did not show up at the Laureus Awards or in cultural conversations as someone stepping away from her sport. She did it as a 20-year-old who has been developing inside elite systems for years, including training at the Rafael Nadal Academy since 2018. She grew up watching Manny Pacquiao turn boxing nights into national events in Quezon City. She has trained alongside Rafael Nadal himself during off-season sessions that she described as physically grueling purely from the intensity. Those experiences shaped a very specific understanding of pressure, identity, and expectation, one that does not separate sport from culture, but carries both simultaneously. That is what it means to carry something larger than yourself into a room. The Rafael Nadal philosophy did not simply sharpen her technique. It shaped her understanding of discipline, repetition, and what sustained excellence actually demands. She has said that Nadal's work ethic never fully leaves you, and that experiencing it firsthand left a lasting impression she describes not as pressure, but as genuinely formative. That mindset surfaces in how she talks about competition itself. During this difficult stretch of clay court tennis, her perspective has stayed measured. When things are going badly, they are not as bad as they seem. And when things are going well, they are not as perfect as they feel. Stay humble, but stay hungry. That is not just a phrase. It is a framework for processing momentum, results, and setbacks. And the same clarity runs through how she speaks about identity. A loud life in soft lighting. A quiet nod to where I come from. These are not accidental sound bites. They reflect someone who is actively thinking about what she represents, both on and off the court, rather than reacting to it after the fact. What the fashion world encountered in the weeks leading up to the Met Gala 2026 was not a performer staging identity for attention. It was a 20-year-old athlete, the first Filipina to break into the WTA Top 50 in the Open era, wearing cultural history inside a room full of global sporting icons and making no effort to soften it. That is why it stayed in the conversation. Not because it was loud, but because it was complete. Hollywood had the budget, the infrastructure, the global machinery. It had Beyoncé, a decade of anticipation, $75,000 tickets, and the full institutional force of Vogue shaping the narrative well in advance. Alex Eala had 7 days, one uncle, and something that none of that money can manufacture. And the morning after the Met Gala 2026, The conversation still had not moved on.
It was still in Madrid, still on that carpet.
Still on that Filipiniana. That is no longer a style moment. It becomes something closer to a cultural echo that refuses to fade, one that required no Hollywood publicist, no staged rollout, no coordinated media push. It simply happened because the image carried weight entirely on its own terms. And while all of that played out beyond the court, the tennis season did not pause. The clay swing is still active. The Italian Open is live. Roland Garros is only weeks away. What comes next is no longer just about a single outfit or a single night. It is about how a player manages both momentum on court and attention far beyond it. The clay season is heating up. Rome is underway. Paris is approaching fast. And every dimension of what Alex Eala does next, on and off the court, is still unfolding.